Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. As always, if this is your first time ever with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants, we are all about bringing science, adventure, exploration, and conservation live into classrooms across North America and beyond. So if you head over to exploringbytheseat.com, you can find 30, 40, 50 or more live events a month for classrooms. Sign up. Register to tune in via YouTube, grab a camera spot, interact. It's a whole lot of fun for your class. Really excited for today's event. It's kind of a little bittersweet though. We have been joining National Geographic explorer Joe Cutler for the last several months as he's done his mega transect of the Ogooue River in Gabon in Africa. So this is one of Africa's last wild rivers. He's traveled over 1,000 kilometers along the river, surveying the biodiversity of freshwater fish, as well as other species along the river. And all of this is because there are several dams slated for the river. So if Joe can get an idea of what the biodiversity is like, he can give that to the government and other organizations to try and do something about what's happening. So we've been so fortunate to connect with Joe and his team all the way along the river. I think we've done 5 or 6 connections along the river, learning about all the adventures that they've been having. And now Joe has done it. Let's bring Joe in so we can see where Joe is. Joe is at the Atlantic Ocean. Joe, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Hi, everybody. It's great to be able to live stream, and it's awesome to be here at the Atlantic Ocean on the coast here in Gabon. Really exciting to have successfully completed our expedition. Paddled almost the whole way across the country of Gabon, and we finished in one piece. Nobody died. Nobody got terribly injured. So I think it was a great success and really fun to be able to kind of share the stories and engage with classrooms throughout the trip and here at the end. So I'm really happy to be here today.
Well, Joe, looking at all the pictures you've sent, the video clips, what we've done from the field along the way, I'd say it's a great success for a whole lot of reasons. Not the least of which being this hasn't been done in, 140 years. So we'd love you just to tell us, a few stories, break it down, bring us down the river with you to get us started.
Yeah, so the Ogooue it's one of the largest rivers in Central Africa. It's the 4th largest in Africa in terms of the amount of water that flows out of it. But it's been 140 years since the last major expedition on the Ogooue. And our team actually covered more kilometers, more miles on the river than any expedition to date. And so we were the first team to ever do a descent of the Ogooue in a raft. And there were times where it was totally crazy, totally scary, but it was really successful in the end. We were able to survey 41 sites on the river, 14 proposed dam sites, and collect really critical baseline data for the conservation of this river system and the conservation of fresh waters here in Gabon. So we've done a series of hangouts. We did a hangout in Lasterville, a hangout in Lope, a hangout in Njole, a hangout in Lambaréné, and finally we're doing this last hangout from the Atlantic Ocean after having completed our expedition. So it's really exciting, and it was really cool to be able to go from really high up in the river system all the way out to the ocean and to see how the river changed, how the biodiversity changed, how the fishes changed throughout that transect. I feel really lucky that it went so smoothly and so pain-free, and I feel really grateful to have had this opportunity to explore such a wild ecosystem and one of the last, really wild rivers here in Africa. So I feel very grateful for this opportunity and really grateful for the opportunity to share this experience with classrooms and teachers kind of around the world. It's been really a great aspect of our project here. The last hangout we did was in Lambaréné. And Lambaréné is still pretty far inland. It's about 120 miles or about 200 kilometers from the ocean. But what's crazy about Gabon is it's a really flat country. So we were about at 36 feet of elevation, or about 12 meters when we were in Lambaréné. And so the last 120 miles we only went down 36 feet in elevation. So it was really flat. And we went through the Ugue Delta, which was totally different than anything we had seen up until date. So it was really cool. I'd love to show some photographs of kind of how the river changed once we left Lambaréné. So, Joe, I think I sent you a few photographs and videos. Maybe you can pull up one of those images. So you can see that tiny little dot right in the center of the screen. That's our boat, and it's a big raft. But as compared to the Ogooue, it looks tiny. It looks like a little tiny ant. After Lambaréné, the Ogooue really, it slows down and it widens up. So it gets really big, really wide, really slow. And because we were doing it in the dry season, it was really shallow. There were sandbanks all over the river, and we were basically swinging back and forth across the river to avoid these shallow areas and follow kind of the main channel. And again, you can just see how massive this river system is. Again, that tiny little dot in the center is our raft. So at this point in the Ogooue, it was really big and really wide. But soon, maybe 2 or 3 days after we left Lambaréné, we reached the Ugue Delta. And at this point, the Ogooue splits into a bunch of different channels, because the Ogooue, it doesn't have just one way that it flows. Here in this video, you're going to see some of the birds we saw on one of the sandbanks. And these are all white pelicans, huge birds that migrate up the Ogooue during the dry season to go and feed in the shallow waters of the sandbanks. And one thing that was really cool about this zone was we were able to kind of see the transition from freshwaters to marine ecosystems. So for me, it was really exciting to see the pelicans, because that's clearly an ocean bird, but they're making it way up into the Ogooue River and feeding out there. So that was really exciting for me. So we left the kind of the main channel, and then the Ogooue started splitting and spreading. But one of the things that was crazy about the Ogooue, the lower Ogooue, is that there are lots of hippos and lots of crocodiles out there. So in this photograph, you can see a big male hippo. What you can't see is that there's a whole family of hippos under the surface. So in 3 days alone, we saw 8 hippos, including a group of 5 with a teeny tiny baby. And a baby hippo is a little bit pink, which was totally crazy to see in the wild. Now, hippos are really dangerous. They're considered the most dangerous animal in Africa. And one day we were paddling near the bank, and this huge eruption in the water happened right next to our boat, probably 6 feet from our boat. And it was a hippo that was right under the surface, and we scared it as we paddled by. And so it surged up to the surface and then fled away from us. But it was a really scary moment. And thankfully, it went the other direction rather than hitting our boat. But the lower Ogooue is full of big animals. So we saw more crocodiles and more hippos and more tracks of elephants and big fish than we saw anywhere else. One of the things that we saw was a lot of fishermen and a lot of hunters. And a lot of the fishermen in this area, they accidentally catch crocodiles in their nets. So when they've got a net in the water and it's full of fish, the crocodiles go in to eat the fish out of the net. This crocodile was at least 250 pounds, and that's the head of it. And I could barely lift this head to take a photograph. Now, this is a slender-snouted crocodile, a critically endangered and protected species here in Gabon. But the fishermen, it drowned in the net. It was entangled in the net and was stuck underwater, so it was drowned. And so the fishermen harvested the crocodile, chopped it up into pieces, and they were taking it into town to sell it so that they could buy another fishing net. Now, one of the things that's really scary was we were swimming, bathing, fishing in the same river that's got hippos, crocodiles, bull sharks, and all sorts of other things that can eat you. So every time you're going into the water and it's dark out, you're always looking over your shoulder, hoping that there's not a crocodile stalking you or that you're bathing right next to a hippopotamus, because that wouldn't be a fun way to end the expedition. Now, one of the things that we saw in the lower Ogooue was a lot more people and a lot more usage of the river. So a lot of the upper Ogooue, we saw no one, no villages, no boats, no fishing nets, nothing. But here in the lower Ogooue, it's really well utilized. It's, there's a lot of fishing pressure, both from the coast side and from Lambaréné. And so people drive long distances, maybe even 50 miles to go and fish in this area. And it's a super productive area. But this area is also used for a lot of transportation, and people float logs down the river so that they can bring them out to the coast and ship them internationally. So it's a little hard to tell what's going on in this photograph, but those are all huge trees, big logs that have been cut out of the forest of Gabon. And that boat up in the top of the photograph, that's probably a 30 or 40 foot long boat. And it's the job of the boat to keep this big flotilla of logs together as it floats downstream. Now, what's really crazy is there are two guys in this photograph standing on the logs. You can hardly even see them because the logs are so big and the photograph is so big that the people are just little tiny dots on those logs. Now, what was crazy is we were watching this big flotilla coming downstream. Thankfully, we had pulled off on the bank and we were flying our drone because the flotilla hit a sandbank and started to break apart. So two of the connected logs, the big cable tied groups of logs, stayed together, but the third one broke apart. So all throughout the river, you've got these huge pieces of wood floating around like mad, moving down the stream. And thankfully, we were out on the banks and we were just able to watch the chaos moving downstream. But unfortunately, it's something that happens really often here in Gabon. And once the logs, the free floating logs, make it out to the ocean, they float up onto the beach. So if you see behind me, there's a lot of wood on the beach here. That's all from timber extraction. And it's from when the logs break apart from the flotilla and then float out on their own into the ocean and get blown back up onto the beach. And it's actually a major threat for sea turtles that lay their eggs on the beach because it blocks their path up the beach to where they're going to lay their eggs. Now, here in Libreville, there's a little bit fewer logs, but if you go across the estuary to the other side, almost the whole beach is covered with big old logs that are impossible to recover at this point. So that was really a crazy thing to see. One of the other things, as a fish biologist, when we were up in the river, in the upper river, it was all freshwater fish. Yes, we caught snappers. Yes, we caught some haemulids, some mohara. But as we approached the coast, the fish diversity changed completely. We started seeing things that I think of as strictly marine fishes. So this is a baby jack, a Carangidae. And jacks are really impressive fishes. They're pretty closely related to mackerel and tuna. But we didn't know that they were breeding in the estuary in the Ogooue River until we collected this specimen. And so for me, it was super exciting to see a fish like this, a little baby fish in the Ogooue River, which is a really strong sign that the ocean and the river are very connected here in Gabon. And it's not hard to imagine, considering how low elevation the Ogooue is. It's really easy for fish to swim upstream, lay their eggs up there where the babies can grow and be protected in the mangrove roots, just a little bit inland of the estuary. But it wasn't just jacks. This is a pipefish. And I love pipefish. They're one of my favorite fishes to catch here in Gabon because they're so weird. When you catch a pipefish, you often think it's a stick or, some sort of weird branch that's moving because they're super thin, they're armor plated, and they look nothing like a fish. This fish has tiny little fins and a little dorsal fin and a little tail fin, but you can hardly see it. It looks just like a stick, and this fish lives on camouflage. And what's really cool, here in Central Africa, there are some species of freshwater pipefish, but this is a marine species that we caught in fresh waters. So it was really cool to see actually how the diversity in the lower Ogooue changed as a function of the tides. At high tide, we saw more marine fishes, and at low tide, we saw more freshwater fishes. So the fish are moving up and down with the salinity of the water, which changes twice every day. And so as we were sampling, we were able to see this transition. The one thing that was crazy, though, was we'd arrive at a site at low tide, and 2 or 3 hours later, it'd be completely underwater. So we had to be really selective about where we were pitching our tents for the night, because we didn't want all of our equipment and our tents to float away. So it was kind of a crazy thing. Now, of course, the fishing got better and better and better as we approached the coast side. We caught so many big snapper. I even lost count of how many big snapper we caught, but we also caught giant African threadfin. We caught sole, which is a flatfish, and we caught tarpon. Now, this is an awesome fish. It's the biggest plupaeid in the whole world. It's a giant herring. And this fish is probably about 100 pounds, a 50-kilo fish. But here in Gabon, they get to be over 250 pounds, over 100 kilos. And so it's absolutely mind-blowing that fish like this travel up the Ogooue. Now, one thing that we learned when we were talking to the local fishermen is tarpon used to swim all the way to Lambaréné. So they used to swim 120 miles upstream and get caught in town. But now there's so much fishing, such a strong fishing effort at the river mouth, that there are fewer and fewer giant tarpon that are making it into the river systems. You see a lot of juvenile tarpon, maybe 15-pound fish, but you don't see the giants any longer. And it's because there was a lot of trawling done at the river mouths, and now there's a lot of gill netting done at the river mouths. So a lot of the big marine migrants are now not making it into the Ogooue River like they used to. So there are definitely more human impacts in the lower Ogooue than anywhere else we saw on this expedition. There was also a little bit more hardship during this phase of the expedition. So it started to rain on us a lot. And when you are wet all the time, we were wet for 7 weeks straight, you start getting sick. Your skin starts degrading. What you see here is what I would like to call zombie foot. The disease is called trench foot. And it's when you've been wet for so long and your skin starts rubbing and peeling off and degrading. And so our feet were just totally disgusting, and we were limping by the time we actually made it out to the coast side. And it was really nice to dry off finally once we got off the river. Thankfully, our feet are fully healed at this point. But bad feet wasn't the only difficulty. Our expedition photographer and communications lead, Megan, got a terrible case of malaria, probably about 4 or 5 days before we reached the coast. And malaria is a crazy disease because you have this really high fever that cycles. And so you're feeling okay for an hour, and then the next hour you're super burning hot, sweating, suffering. And so she's in the front of the boat giving us the thumbs up, even though she's wrapped in a towel, in a blanket, trying her best to stay warm, even though I was sitting there sweating. So, case of malaria, bad zombie foot, tides that were rising and falling, making our beautiful sand spits where we were planning on sleeping disappear. And then the other thing that was a real challenge was the wind. As we were approaching the coast, it got really windy. So paddling against the wind was really difficult. And so instead of going maybe 10, 15 kilometers in a day, we were lucky to make it 5 or 10 kilometers in a day. And so the last few days were really painful, really slow. You'd be paddling as hard as you could, looking at the bank, watching the trees to see if you were moving. 5 minutes later, you'd look over and you'd see the same tree. And it was really, it tried your patience and your strength. But eventually we made it out, and this is the mouth of the Ogooue at Ogooue. So there's a little bit of a sand spit there off in the distance, but that is the Atlantic Ocean. And on the right there, you can see the last town of the Ogooue. That's the town of Ogooue. And it's basically like a glorified fishing village. There's not really anything there. So we weren't really sure. I've never been to Ogooue. So we pulled our boat up onto the bank, and we, you'd expect that we're all jumping for joy and hooting and hollering, but we were so exhausted. Our feet were so sore. We were so sick that we basically crawled out of the raft onto the beach and walked slowly, limped slowly into town. This is the final strokes of the Ogooue megatransect right here. And that's as much excitement as I could muster after paddling across the whole country of Gabon, just because we were so exhausted, so beat. And thankfully, no one was there videotaping us, because we're hobbling out of the boat, asking the local people, is this Ogooue? Are we finally at the end? And they're like, yes. And we're like, finally, yes. I need a shower. I need to clean up. I need to wash my clothing. I need to eat a good meal. We were really happy that everything went well. We made it safely, but we were also really happy to reach the end, get a good shower, eat an ice cream. It's amazing how delicious ice cream is after you've been in the field for a couple months. So I feel so grateful that everything went well. We didn't get attacked by crocodiles or hippos. We didn't flip our raft. We didn't have any scary moments. There were a few that were a little bit worrisome, but in the end, everything went really well. And we are the first expedition to ever paddle the Ogooue. We covered more kilometers than any explorer in history. So I feel really grateful that we had the chance to do it. Really grateful that everything worked out as it did. And now we've just got to go through all the media, all the science, and start writing, because we need to share this story with as many people as we can, because it was really remarkable.
All right, Joe. Well, that's, excuse me, absolutely incredible. And thank you so much for sharing, as much of the journey as we could with our classrooms. It was an absolute blast to follow along. And, a huge congrats to you and Megan and the rest of the team who helped you along the way. How many fish, Joe, do you think that you caught and pictured and such?
We did a preliminary count of our specimen, somewhere in the range of 9,500 fish collected on the expedition. And I'm estimating somewhere in the 80 to 90 different species of fish. So we probably caught about a third of the known biodiversity on the Ogooue in this one expedition, which is really incredible. I feel like we did quite a bit. It was a really successful trip in terms of science. And we really filled in a lot of data gaps, including at 14 proposed dam sites. So I've been having a lot of meetings here in Libreville. I was able to meet the Minister of Water and Forests here in Gabon and share a lot of the stories and kind of make my pitch that we need to protect the Ogooue River, because it is one of the last big rivers in Africa that remains so intact and so wild that if we can protect this, it's going to be just a gem for generations to come. It's going to be really important just for the future of biodiversity and livelihoods here in Gabon. So I feel really lucky, and I think people are listening and getting excited about it. So I feel very lucky about that as well.
Awesome, Joe. Let's start hanging out with a few classrooms here. Let's start with Mrs. Kirby's group, some 3rd and 4th graders hanging out in Ontario. I'm going to bring Mrs. Kirby in. How we doing, Mrs. Kirby?
Good. Oh, wait. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we gotcha.
Oh, good. Hi, Joes. We had a really, really good time learning from you. We didn't follow you the whole time, unfortunately, but we followed you tailing the end of your... Hold on. My friends in class, my microphone's only muted for you, but I'm going to talk to Joe and I'm going to chat with you in the chat window, okay? Okay. We had a really good time following you, and we've been learning a lot about our adaptations.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. We've been learning a lot about adaptations in the environment, so that was really interesting, and we were just curious if there was anything that you found, any animal or fish or plant that you thought was like super neat or different that you found in your expedition?
All right, Joe, did you hear that question?
No, I lost you all.
Yeah, you're frozen on us, Joe, but can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, so Mrs. Kirby's class, they're studying adaptations, and they're wondering if there was any fish or animal that really stood out for you with, maybe a cool adaptation or something that really stuck out along the journey.
Well, I think the pipefish are really unique fishes. I mean, with their armor plating and their ability to camouflage, I think that that's really awesome. I also, I think I spoke previously about electric catfishes here in Gabon. Those are some really awesome, really well-adapted fish. And to think that there's one group of catfish that somehow evolved the capacity to produce electricity for defense and predation, that to me is really cool. And then a final group of fish that I think is awesome are the mormyrids, which are the elephant fishes that communicate and navigate with electricity, a lot like bats navigate with sound, with sonar. These fish electrolocate and electrocommunicate. So to me, those are three easy highlights in terms of fish adaptations here in Gabon.
All right. Very cool, Joe. I'm going to bring our next group in. We have Mrs. Wilmoth's group joining us. They are in Mount Airy, North Carolina. You've had a big following in North Carolina, Joe. You're a popular guy there. You'll have to go visit someday.
Sounds good to me.
All right, Mrs. Wilmoth, do you want to unmute for me?
Man, I forgot a question.
What were you going to ask?
I have no clue.
You want me to come back, or do you have one?
You can come back. I got one.
We'll come back.
Okay, I will come back. We're going to go to Mrs. Maxwell's group. They are...
I haven't seen any. I keep flipping back and forth. Oh, what did you eat the whole time on the
we
trip?
ate a lot of food that we could get locally. So we ate a lot of gari, a lot of manioc, a lot of fufu, a lot of rice, couscous, a lot of canned food, a lot of tomatoes, eggplants, and of course, a lot of fish soup. Fish soup is one of the most popular dishes here in Gabon, and so it was a real favorite for our team. So we ate a lot of fish that we caught, and had a lot of carbohydrates and a lot of canned food. I wouldn't say that we ate very well on the expedition. I think everybody lost a few pounds, but I've quickly put them back on after getting back into town.
All right, we've got another group in North Carolina. Mrs. Haynes, fifth graders. How are we doing?
Hi, Joe. How are you doing? We want to say congratulations on the end of your journey. We've watched you throughout, and we're so excited for you. Thank you for allowing us to share in this experience. My question that I have for our class is, what is the most surprising thing you found along your expedition that you didn't understand or you didn't think you were going to find?
You know, one of the most amazing things that we found was just how connected this river system is. So I'd done quite a bit of work during my PhD trying to study migratory fishes here in Gabon. And we knew that fish migrated from the ocean about 400 kilometers inland. So we thought, wow, that's really remarkable. But we found on this expedition that marine fishes migrate 600 kilometers up into the Ogooue system. So that's way more than halfway across the country of Gabon. And it makes me think that, if dams are built on this river system, the impacts are going to be really, really dramatic. And it may really affect these, commercially and culturally important fish species like red snapper that migrate into fresh waters. So that was one thing that I found really remarkable that we discovered on this expedition. And I think it's really important when we're thinking about the management and protection of a river system like this to ensure that these migratory corridors are protected for these really important species like the snappers.
So, Joe, speaking of those dams, we have a question from Akash who's joining us in India. And he's wondering, is there, obviously they're built for a purpose and electricity is a big, reason. But is there maybe an alternative solution that could be offered?
The reason that the dams are being considered is mostly to support mining industries here in Gabon. So there's a lot of riches, but mining is very energy intensive. So what one of the plans is here is you build a series of dams around where the mines are going to be placed, and that's your local energy source. Now, there are some ways that we can build dams that will have a smaller effect on fishes. So you can dam part of the river, or you can even you can place turbines in the water and not actually block the river itself. So those are a couple options. Gabon also has a lot of petroleum. It has a lot of gas and diesel. And so one of the things that Gabon uses right now is a lot of generators. A lot of towns run on generators here in Gabon. That's actually probably the number one energy source here in Gabon. So if we're thinking about rural electrification and making sure the Gabonese population has electricity, I think that you could do it with a combination of solar and generators, and you could leave all of the rivers free flowing. Now, I don't think that you could support mining with generators and solar. So it's a little bit of a question of what we're using the energy for. That said, some of the surrounding countries here, including Congo, are considering building very large dams that could actually power all the surrounding countries. So, for example, in Congo, on the Congo River, there's a proposed dam at Inga Falls, which is a massive waterfall in the Congo. And if that dam is built, it'll produce plenty of energy for Congo, Gabon, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and a lot of the surrounding countries. So if Gabon waits and the other countries develop their dams, that may be another solution. I also think that I may be a funny conservationist, but I think that even nuclear power could be a potential solution here in Gabon, and it would really protect the forest and river ecosystems that we have here. And there's actually a lot of uranium here naturally in Gabon. It was a major source of uranium during the World Wars.
All right, great solution. It seems like there are some options. So that's good. Soccer's fifth graders. Mount Airy, how are we doing?
Hey, we're good. Okay, come here. Okay, yes. What's your question?
How long it took him to get there?
Okay. Autumn wants to know, how long did it take you to get to where you are?
Oh, that's
so, in total, it took us about 7 weeks to paddle from Franceville to Ogooue. And we were pretty much paddling the whole time. There was never a day where we said, we're making good progress, let's just float. The whole time we were paddling, going as fast as we could, because the rainy season is now upon us. And the Ogooue River is a crazy river because the water level changes probably 15 meters. Water in the end of the dry season is probably 45 feet lower than what it would be at the end of the rainy season. So we were really afraid that we were going to be out there, the water level was going to rise, and we'd have no place to sleep. And I'd imagine that the rapids would be a lot more scary and a lot more dangerous with that much water in the river system. So we were working really hard to beat the rainy season. If I get to do it again, I'm going to hope to take a lot longer so that we have more time out there, because it was just so awesome to be out in the forest, to be on the river, and to get to know the system a bit better. Next time we're shooting for 6 months rather than 7 weeks.
All right, Mrs. Wilmot's group, we're coming back your way.
Okay. When y'all were on the way to the ocean, did y'all's boat ever flip over during big waves or anything?
You know, the navigation got easier and easier as we approached the ocean. There were no more rapids after Lambaréné. So we didn't flip. We didn't flip at all on this expedition. The scariest times were because of whirlpools. Our boat got sucked into several whirlpools, and we avoided some whirlpools that were absolutely huge. So it's a crazy river because you have not only crocodiles and hippos, but you have quicksand and whirlpools and crazy rocks. There were probably 2 or 3 times where we were very close to flipping our boat, but we never did, thankfully.
All right. Well, Joe, I'm going to put a website here in the chat. I'm going to put, I'll put it up on a banner here. There we go. Where classrooms can go and check out some of the journey, check out some photos. I think that really cool map that Diego put together is up there as well for them to see. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that map, Joe?
Yeah, so our friend Diego Ponce de Leon Burrito, who's also a National Geographic explorer, he helped us to put together a really cool interactive map where you can see our track and you can see our posts from each individual site. And at each post, we've also recorded sound recordings of the river system. So you can click on a point, you can see what the image looks like, what we were seeing there, and you can hear the sound of the point. What else is cool about this map is that there are some other layers you can put on it. So you can look at the protected areas in Gabon, both the terrestrial, the national parks, but also the marine protected areas, the buffer zones. We can look at where the towns and villages in Gabon are, and you can see you can also see the Ogooue River drainage just to see how massive it is. And this, to me, is one of the best ways to kind of encapsulate a long, massive project like this. Because a lot of people, they couldn't follow along, they couldn't join in for all the hangouts. And so when you're seeing disjoint posts, you know, just an image here or an image there, it's hard to kind of see how the river changed as we moved from inland out toward the coast. So to me, that's a really cool resource, a really fun way to kind of follow along with the expedition. And I think we've still got a few more posts to put up. So stay tuned. We've still got a few more images to come.
All right, Joe, $1 million question. This is for Mr. Lavogue's class in North Palm Beach, Florida. Do you think that you have any new species to identify from the river?
You know, when we finished, I was kind of saying, I don't think that there are any new species. But then I was looking back through some of our data, and I think we may have a new species of minnow. I've shown it to all my ichthyology friends here in Gabon, all my fish geeks, and everybody's scratching their head saying, it's definitely not this one. It's definitely not this one. It's definitely not this one. And so we're going to have to do a little bit more research, but we may have at least one new species of minnow. But we definitely have a lot of new records for the Ogooue, and a lot of species that weren't known from those localities. So we're definitely filling in a lot of data gaps, even if we don't have any new species on this expedition.
Yeah, and I think that's really cool too, Joe, is being able to extend those ranges and say, you know what, we now know they're here and they're further up the river than we ever thought before. So that's pretty cool.
And you know what was amazing is some species, they are literally found everywhere in the whole Ogooue River, all the way from the ocean, all the way up into the highland plateaus. all the way to Franceville. So, there were a few species that they're really ubiquitous. And so that's another thing that tells me that the Ogooue is very connected. That one population of fish, even a small fish, could extend throughout this whole river system. It was really remarkable. And so we're really filling in a lot of gaps here on the Ogooue.
All right, Joe, before we let you go for today, we want to soak up some of that sun, some of that heat. Can you do a nice little pan around? Let's see the ocean. Let's see the trees behind you. It looks amazing.
Yeah, it's really beautiful here. The one thing I will say is, with it being rainy season now, there's a lot more garbage on the beach. So we're right at the mouth of an estuary, and everything that's being blown out of the estuary and from town here kind of washes back up on the beach. So there's a little bit of garbage here, but outside of that, it is really a tropical paradise. And I don't know if you can see it, but right across over there, across the estuary, is a national park called Pongara National Park. And we spent a couple days over there to relax and catch up. And we saw elephants, buffalo, sea turtles, freshwater turtles, land turtles, whales, and then we saw tracks of hippopotamus, elephants, and leopards on the beach. So, we're here in the capital city of Gabon, and just there, less than an hour-long boat ride, and you've got elephants, gorillas, chimpanzees, hippopotamus, crocodiles, and all the biodiversity that you'd ever imagine here in Africa. So it's really an amazing place. One of my friends says, they've got their heads in the modern era and their feet.
All right, looks like we might have lost Joe for a second. Let's see if he'll come back. Usually it's just a little bit of a pause. The connection's pretty good. So we'll just give him a second there before we wrap up today. What I am going to do, though, right before I wrap up, is pop our classrooms in if they want to say a big goodbye and thank you to Joe right at the end. So we're going to do that. I'll give you a heads up. But for now, we'll wait just a second because we want to make sure we get a good goodbye with Joe as he wraps up. And I believe he's leaving tomorrow. I think he's hopping on a plane and coming back to the U.S. So we'll just be patient and we'll hopefully have Joe. There he goes. He ducked out, which means he's trying to come back in. So let's give him a second and let's get ready for a big shout out. Pretty amazing. Several months on the river, something never done before, and some amazing data to hopefully protect one of Africa's last wild rivers. So we'll give Joe a second to come back to us before we carry on. For the classrooms who are tuning in right now, if you look at our channel later today, it's World Lemur Day today. So we're doing a whole bunch of events with lemurs, different lemur experts. We'll visit the Duke Lemur Center. So those in North Carolina, the Duke Lemur Center is pretty close. In Durham, we'll be visiting the Toronto Zoo and their ring-tailed lemurs. And so we'll be talking about people in Madagascar. So it should be a really fun day if you have some time to catch one of those events today. So I don't know if we're going to get Joe back. I'm going to try and send him a WhatsApp message and see if he gets it. All right, I just sent him a message. Hopefully we see him shortly. But, I think out of all the events that we did, I think it's pretty amazing. It is a remote area that we were able to have connections from so many spots along the river, whether it was in Najol or Lambarne, and then, of course, right at the very end at the Atlantic Ocean. So we're going to give Joe another minute, cross our fingers. He's able to get back in. Otherwise, we might have to sign off, and maybe we can send Joe some emails and messages to say how awesome it is and congratulate him. So we'll just give him a second, see if he can make it back in with us. And then, of course, spend some time playing around on the website today. You can follow down the river, pictures, videos, all kinds of things. And I think we've got our friend back.
Yeah,
Joe.
I'm back. Sorry. My
That's
phone
okay.
ran out of credit, so I had to run back and head over to my friend's house where they have Wi-Fi so that I could use that.
Well, Joe, we really just wanted to congratulate you again. We wanted to thank you for spending so much time with us along the way, making time for us in what I know is a crazy busy schedule. Absolutely incredible. And I wanted to bring the classrooms in, give them a chance to give you a big shout out, a big goodbye, and thank you. So Joe, thank you so much for everything you did to make these events happen. And thank you for the work you're doing to protect, our planet's last wild places.
Thank you, Joe. It's been really great to be able to share this experience. I hope that one of the students in one of the classrooms that's joining in is going to come out to Gabon and study fish and continue to help protect the Ogooue River, because there's a lot more to do out here.
All right, here we go, classrooms. I'm going to pop you in. A big goodbye and thank you to Joe.
Wave bye. Everybody wave.
All right. Thank you so much. Like I said, Joe, you've got to get to North Carolina. Lots of North Carolina classrooms hanging out the whole way along the river. Thank you so much, Joe. Thank you to Megan and your team, and safe travels back home.
Thank you so much, Joe. I'll send the regards, and thank you to all the classrooms and all the students and everybody tuning in. It's been really awesome to be able to share this experience.
All right. We are going to sign off for now, Joe. Thanks for an awesome few weeks.
Thank you.